Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining CCR&R for our week-long celebration, Caring for Essential Providers. We're glad that you could join us. Tonight's session is sponsored by CCR&R of Central Iowa, which is Region 4. And I'd now like to introduce Julie Davis, who's going to tell you more.
Good evening, child care providers. My name is Julie Davis, and I'm the Community Development Specialist for Region 4. Welcome to our second day of our Caring for Essential Providers Week, and this is actually our second session today. Many of you who are watching know about CCR&R and our services, but for somebody who maybe can't watch now and is going to watch the recording later, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our services. We have parent referral services for families who are looking for quality childcare. We provide training for childcare providers. Our childcare consultants provide direct support to programs around the state. And also we work in communities to advocate and educate for quality care and work on building community childcare solutions. Tonight's session is all about self-care for childcare providers. Our guest speaker is Johson, and he is an experienced childcare speaker, trainer, author, and podcaster. And he's also the former owner and director of his own successful childcare program. I'm excited to learn all about the reality of self-care for childcare providers, who we know give up so much of their life and dedicate that to the children in their care. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box as well as Jeff will while he is speaking, but we can save some time if we need to at the end for questions if you have some specific things to ask him. And then make sure that you stick around after too, as we're going to be giving away some fun self-care themed door prizes. So we will draw those names after we finish up. So I'll turn it on over to you, Jeff.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. So here we go. It is February, and February is the month of the year when most early learning professionals burn out and leave the profession if they're going to in a given year. It is apparently the most burnout-ish month of the year. So let's hope we can all make it through the next couple days. This is a real serious topic. I burnt out just about going on 20 years ago. I directed a center for 16 years here in Sioux City where I live, burnt out, quit a job I loved because my boss gave me one more thing to do, and it just kind of made me explode. My wife was my assistant director at the time. She quit the next day. And that's how we found our way into family childcare, which we did for a little over 10 years before moving on and doing some other early learning related things, but not direct care. So I've got 26 years of direct care experience and probably was burning out or burnt out for, I don't know, a good 8 or 10 of those years. This is a hard job that we do. The numbers are a little bit old, but it seems that we lose 30 to 40% of the early learning workforce annually due to burnout related issues. The reason this job is so hard is because what we do is emotional labor, right? Now, you're giving your emotional reserves away all day. You're giving some to the family when you wake up in the morning, and you're bringing some to work, and you're giving it away to kids and coworkers and administrators all day long. And you're trying to save a little bit for your evening so you can go home and be pleasant to people. And people are being demanding of your time. They're asking you to do things like volunteer to watch the nursery at church during services, or make things for the bake sale. And in COVID times, everybody is even more and more stressed about things. And so this ends up being your emotional reserve sometimes. You end up feeling really empty. And if you're trying to work with young children when you're feeling empty and stressed and tired and run down and blah, it's very, very hard to be right here, right now, in the moment. And so we look for ways to put a little something back in the cup. And that's mostly what I want to talk to you about tonight, is putting something back in your cup, because the people who are drawn to this work are very into the whole emotional labor thing, and they're very good at this job. It takes a lot of empathy. a lot of being able to read and understand people. And it's exhausting. There's this physical side of it, and there's that emotional side. How many of you, I wish I could see you all, how many of you feel just drained at the end of the day? You can use the chat box. I'm watching the chat box right here. You spend so much and you give so much to the children that you care for that you don't have anything left for your own families. And then you feel bad about that, and it starts this negative downward spiral. And so my big mission, I've been speaking about this topic for just about 20 years. I started talking about it after I burnt out because I didn't have any resources when I was looking for them. And so I've written 2 books on the topic, and I've spoke on this topic all over the US and Canada and Australia. And it is something I talk about. This is the 3rd one in 8 days that I've done this session, because this is such a big thing that we all deal with. So here's the deal. I want you to, in your heads right now, little assignment, very tiny little assignment. I know you were busy with kids all day, most of you. And so in your head, I want you to make a list of everything in the last 7 days you did for other people. And if you did a thing more than once, tying a shoe, wiping a nose, list it more than once. And in your head, just kind of jot those things down. And then next to that list, I want you to visualize a list of everything you did just for yourself in that same 7 days. I'm going to pause for a moment and just let you think about that. I'm guessing that the list of things you did for other people is much longer than the list of things you did just for yourself. In fact, there are people with a group this size. We got about 80 participants right now. With a group this size, I'm guessing some of you couldn't think of a single thing in the last 7 days you did just for you. Some of you thought, I took a shower. And that's great. If that's all you have time for in a week is a little bit of a time in the shower, that's great, because that's better than nothing. On the other hand, your personal hygiene is kind of for the rest of us. So I'm not sure that really qualifies as something just for yourself. And so this is just an example, because some of you need this example of how much time you give to other people and about how little you give to yourself. Because if you're going to have those resources to give to the children and their parents and your coworkers, you got to constantly be putting something back in the cup. And so if you're not making time for that, you're doing not only yourself, but those children you care for a disservice. Now, I talk about self-care a lot, and one thing, a little bit of pushback I get from people is, I don't have time, and everybody needs me for everything. But the thing is, and they think it's selfish, and they think self-care is selfish. And so here's the thing. You are a better version of yourself when you take care of yourself. And so if you won't commit to self-care for yourself, think about it in terms of being a better version of yourself for all those other people that depend on you, and do it for them, because it needs to be done. You need to invest a little bit more in your own care. And it's a hard thing to do. We're going to get into that in a minute, some positive tips. I want to touch a little bit on what I like to call empty calorie self-care. Because when we're feeling empty, we've got that empty cup, we want to fill up quick, right? And so there's always a big wet spot here on my carpet in front of my computer when I'm done. So we want to fill up quick, and we look for quick solutions. So here's how we do this. Any of you ever do any of these things? At the end of a long, hard day, you go home and you open up a bag of, we'll say Doritos, but maybe it's Oreos or your junk food of choice, and you binge watch an hour and then 2 and then 3 of something. Somebody's ice cream here, absolutely. Because it just gives you a chance to just release. And that puts a little bit back in the cup. ordering pizza, eating ice cream, golden Oreos, all kinds of stuff. So you guys are with me on this. Or you ever do the thing where you're feeling down, and so you decide, I'm going to have a couple Hershey's Kisses. And then 20 minutes later, you look up and you've eaten a whole pound of Hershey's Kisses. Some of you may decide, hey, I'm feeling stressed. I'm going to go on the social media, and you lose time scrolling through social media, judging people and feeling judged by them. There might be one or two of you out there who decide, hey, it's been a tough day. I'm going to have a cocktail when I get home. And then 4 margaritas later, you're kind of wondering if you can make it to bed. All of these are examples of empty calorie self-care. Back in my center days, I had a young lady working for me who I heard a rumor that she was on her 1-hour paid lunch break, which I worked really hard to make sure she had. I heard she was going out to the parking lot and sitting in her car and smoking weed on her paid lunch break. And so the next day I walked across the parking lot, tapped on her window. The window comes down. The smoke comes out like a Cheech and Chong movie. And glassy-eyed, she says, "What?" And I informed her the what was that she was no longer working for the organization. And a couple days later, she showed up for an exit interview, which I hadn't expected. And I said, what's going on? How could you do this? And she said, those infants and toddlers are stressful. Now, I'm not going to argue with that. Infants and toddlers can be stressful. Their older siblings can be stressful. Their parents are maybe the most stressful that we have to deal with, huh? And yet, we maybe don't need to be smoking weed on our lunch breaks or doing any of those other empty calorie things that we do when we want to fill up. And so what I'm going to advocate for is the idea of setting those things aside, those empty calorie activities, and looking for some things that are a little bit more healthy in terms of self-care. And somebody mentioned parents here. We're going to get to parents in a little bit. So here's what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating that you, tomorrow morning, wake up and spend 5 or 10 minutes for yourself, doing something that fills you up, something that you know is going to put a little bit of emotional energy back in that cup, back in that reserve. 5 or 10 minutes, that's all I'm asking for. Now, that might sound like an easy thing. Some of you are thinking, though, I don't have 5 or 10 minutes. And some of you are thinking, I don't know if I can do that. I've heard people tell me, Jeff, I don't think I'm worth it. And that's a hard place to be. So this isn't as easy as it sounds. Otherwise, we'd already be doing it. And so to make a new habit like self-care succeed, it's not about willpower. It's about building a new system of doing things. And so first thing, to make this successful, try tacking this new habit of self-care onto things you're already doing. Something else you're already doing in the morning. You get up, maybe you do this right after you go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, start the coffee maker, and then 5 or 10 minutes for yourself. And I don't want to overwhelm you. If some of you are thinking 5 or 10 minutes, if that's way too much for you, start with 2 or 3. But tack it on to some of your existing morning habits, because that's going to make it more likely that you keep doing it. When you can kind of gang that together with some existing habits. And I recommend this in the morning because then, one, you can check it off your mental to-do list for the day, but also it gets you started with the day with a little bit of reserve in that emotional reservoir. And so you end up being a better version of yourself when you show up for work. If a day is full of ups and downs, a little bit of self-care at the very beginning of the day makes the day less uppy and downy. Now, it never makes it perfectly perfect because you're dealing with other humans, and humans are hard to deal with. So this isn't going to make up your day perfect. It's going to make you a better version of yourself. You're going to make better choices. You're going to make better decisions. You're going to respond more appropriately in moments when things are hard. And that all adds up. So that little bit of self-care at the beginning of the day. And so I get asked, what should I do? And I don't know the answer to what you should do. The answer to what you should do, my answer to what you should do might stress you out. So I challenge you, I urge you tonight before you go to sleep, if you're thinking about giving this a try, make a short list for yourself. Close your eyes for 30 seconds and think, what would fill my cup? And jot down whatever pops into your mind over the course of a minute or two. And you'll have some ideas. For some people, it's reading or exercising or spending time with a pet or meditating or praying or listening to their favorite music, or if you're an artsy person, it might be crocheting or knitting or painting or whatever it is that you like to do when you have time to do a thing for yourself. And just that little bit of self-care is going to have a positive impact. Now, you might try this tomorrow. I hope you do. If you do, email me and let me know. You'll have a better day. And you might sleep better that evening. I hear this regularly from people is I did this and I slept better that night than I have in months. And that's a good thing too. That starts this positive spiral of self-care. But what happens, because you are human, just like the rest of us, is after 2 or 3 or 4 days, you're going to oversleep or you're going to be in a rush and you're going to forget to do the self-care. And then, because you're human like the rest of us, you're probably going to go into this negative thing where you beat yourself up and judge yourself. And I knew that wasn't going to work, and start beating yourself up about it. And so here's the trick. In that moment, when that happens, and it probably will happen, it happens to most of us when we start trying to change things up like this, pause and forgive yourself. Because you're literally trying to rewire your brain. And that, it turns out, is a little bit more difficult for us adults than it is for 2-year-olds. And so you're going to have some setbacks. And so forgive yourself, take a breath, and start over the next day. Because what you're doing is you're building new neural pathways for these new habits in your head. If you can, fold your fingers like this for a moment. Now, most of you can do that without even thinking about it. You've been folding your hands like that since you were 2 or 3 years old. And it's pretty comfortable. It didn't take any thought. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to pull those fingers apart and slide the other pinky to the outside and refold your fingers. How's it feel? For most of you, it feels weird, awkward. Weird, awkward, and wrong are the 3 things that I usually hear, and 2 of them popped right up there in the chat right away. And so that's those neural pathways. The first way is the way that your brain is wired to fold your fingers. Maybe you never folded them the other way when you're little. Maybe you did the other way, but you preferred this way, and the other one got pruned back. For whatever reason, your brain has a bunch of robust neural pathways to make one way feel real comfortable and the other feel weird, awkward, wrong. So if you want to make that weird, awkward, wrong way feel more normal, all you have to do is every day for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months, multiple times a day, put those fingers together the wrong way. And over time, because of brain plasticity, which somebody mentioned in the chat, your brain's going to say, well, this is important, wire it up. And then those new neural pathways are going to start forming. But it's going to take some time for that to happen. One of the things you can do to make a new habit sticky is make it something that you do a lot. So lots of repetition, doing the thing every day, a little bit of self-care, 5 or 10 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes of self-care every day is better than an hour of self-care over the weekends. It's just that daily thing that makes us into a habit. Another thing that you do is you forgive yourself when you have those setbacks. And what the research on habit building indicates is that the other thing you can do to make this a little bit easier for yourself is that when you are doing the thing that you want to be the new habit, maybe it's spending a couple minutes for yourself in the morning, maybe it's choosing a glass of water instead of a sugary drink, whatever it is, celebrate when you're doing it. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be kind of an inward smile that you're doing something that you know is good for you. And if you're a out there kind of person, you might want to jump up and down after you spend 5 or 10 minutes reading in the morning, if that's the way you celebrate things, because that celebration releases the chemicals in your brain that your brain really likes. And then your brain wants more of those chemicals. And so your brain makes it a little bit easier for you to do the thing you were just doing, is the quickest way to pull this apart when it comes to the brain research. And so celebrate the thing you want to be a new habit. Forgive yourself when you have those setbacks, and really work on the repetition of making it a daily habit. So what else can you do? I got to get a drink here. This is just tea. What else can you do? One thing I want you to think about is starting to say no a little bit more often in your day. Because my experience is that early learning professionals are people that say yes to a lot of things. How many of you, let's see this in the chat, how many of you in the last 6 months have said yes to something you really, 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 really didn't want to do, but you said yes and did it anyway? Me. Okay, so this is something that we do, right? We're kind of wired. We're wired for this. We want to take care of people. So people ask us to do stuff. We want people to be happy. People ask us to do stuff and we do it. And I think we have a hard time saying no. We say yes because we feel obligated. We feel like maybe we're being told instead of asked, really. We say yes because if we say no, then somebody else will do it and they'll do it wrong, and then you have to redo it anyway. We feel yes. We say yes because we're under pressure. We say yes because we're afraid of disappointing someone. Somebody just put in the chat. All of those things. If I say no, they won't like me anymore. All of that stuff. And so the power to say no in your life to things you really, really don't want to do is difficult. And being able to do it also frees up a little bit more of your life for your life. And if you did that list of everything you did for other people and everything you did for yourself, and you saw that the list of other people stuff was huge and the list of you stuff was tiny to non-existent, it might be a wake-up call that saying no once in a while might be a good idea. This is a superpower. And so I've got 2 tips for making saying no a little bit easier. One is to always have an excuse in your back pocket. It can be something simple. It can be something complicated. You could go on the interwebs after this session, and you could like download some pictures of a turtle and then put it into your purse or your billfold or whatever, and then start talking to everybody about work, about your new pet turtle that you adopted from the abandoned turtle sanctuary, and you start talking about how much you love this turtle, and then after a couple of weeks, when everybody knows you have this new imaginary, they don't know it's imaginary, pet turtle, then when people start asking you to do things, all you got to do is say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the Timmy the turtle, he's got a cold. I can't do that for you. I apologize. I wish I could maybe next time." Or, "Hey, oh, Timmy the turtle, I've got to take him for a turtle wax, so I've already got an appointment. I can't work late." Those kind of things. You've always got that excuse in your back pocket, because it's hard to say, "No, I can't do that. I don't want to do that." But having an excuse ready for you at all times makes it a little bit easier. The other one is, since saying no to somebody is a little bit more difficult face to face, you got to game the system so you can actually do the no part online or over the telephone. Isn't that lying, Stacy? Yeah, probably. People lie all the times about all kinds of things. And if it and would it be better if you said no to somebody just because that would be telling the truth? Absolutely. If you are I'm not very good at that. Well, Stacy, you got to practice. No, I mean, yeah, it is lying, and maybe there is an ethical gray area there for some of you, and for some of you, that little white lie is going to make this learning this new skill a little bit easier. Maybe this other tip is helpful too. So, instead of doing the no part face to face, you can game the system so you can do it electronically. And here's how that works: the boss comes and says, "Hey, can you work Sally's shift tomorrow? She called in sick." And you want to say no, but you're too scared to do it face to face. You say, "I have to check my calendar. I'll email you tonight and let you know." And then you do the no part via the email. So that makes it just a little bit easier. It takes the face-to-face component out of it for you. And as you build up a little bit of practice and realize the world doesn't end when you say no to somebody, then it gets a little bit easier and you build up some confidence, and then doing it face to face gets a little bit easier. Now, you can't tell somebody, "Hey, I don't know, I got to check, I'll message you tonight," and then you like quit your job and move out of the country. You can't do that. You actually have to get back to them. But doing it electronically makes it just a little bit easier for those of you who struggle with this. And some people have no problem saying no to people. And again, it's kind of a superpower, especially if you haven't practiced this. So it's like the finger thing. You got to build up the habits. You got to make that a new thing for you. Another thing that I would like you to think about in the next time you have a minute of free time is making a list of all of the things about this work that keep you coming back. Why do you keep coming back to this work? If you're stressed and anxious and frustrated and run down and burnt out, and yet you show up the next day. For some people, it's just being with the kids. For some, it's the aha moment where when you see a child learn a new thing. For some, it's the relationships with your peers. But most of us have these things. And what I'd like you to do is make a list of these things and try to set up your life so you pay just a little bit more attention to them. Because it turns out that it's easier to pay a little bit more attention to the things that are going right and build more of those things into your life and focus more on them. It goes a long way to reducing burnout, but it's also easier than changing the things that are maybe broken or not working. Paying attention to the things that are already working in your life. It draws focus, but it also helps you attend to those things a little bit more. But also, I would like you to make a list of the things about your work that really get under your skin. The thing that gets you scratching that last nerve. And make that honest list for yourself. You don't have to ever show it to another human being, because I mean that other human being might be on the list, right? So make that list of the things that get under your under your skin. Parents. Of course, parents are on the list, and absolutely. I've divided these into three. There's three kind of big categories of the under the skin things. There's kid stuff. We've all met that one kid that just when they fuss, they hit that whiny voice that just it's like a screwdriver into your ear, or the tattling or whatever it is. So there's the kid stuff, but the parent stuff is huge here as well, right? So there's the parent who always forgets their checkbook or their payment on the day bills are due. There's the parent who brings their child in late with breakfast from McDonald's. There's the parent who asks you for advice, and then you feel really good about yourself, and then they do the exact opposite thing. There's the parent who brings their child in sick. The child shows up and they've got a little drop of purple on their onesie, and you know it's cough medicine, medicine, and by 11:15 in the morning, the snot is flowing again, and the child actually says to you, "Mommy gave me medicine," and you call the parent at work and tell them their child is sick, and they're like, "Oh, she's sick. She was fine this morning. I definitely didn't give her anything and bring her to childcare." There's that parent, and on and on and on we can go. And I think it's probably good for us to vent about this kind of stuff. But we also have to remember that parents are just as burnt out as we are, right? Because they take their kids home at night, most of them, and so I understand how they get under the skin, and I also know that we need to kind of put ourselves in their shoes sometimes too. But venting about it and getting it out of our system is probably a good thing for us. The third category of under the skin is some version of them, the them that are looking over your shoulder and kind of managing things and telling you how to do your job, and because we all don't, none of us, most of us don't like to be micromanaged, and so that kind of it kind of sets the hair on our the back of our neck standing up when we've got them hovering over us. So make this list for yourself, the things that get under your skin, and it might be very specific things. It might be when a child does a very specific thing, when a parent treats you a very specific way. Be as specific as possible, mostly because being aware of those things ahead of time makes them less likely to trigger negative reactions in you when you're already feeling stressed out. And so if you're having a bad day and then one of those things that gets into your skin just kind of pops up, it can turn a bad day into a horrible, rotten day. But being a little bit more aware of them just kind of pulls them out of the sky and keeps them a little bit more organized for you. And that just gives you a little bit more power and control over them. And that's a good thing. I'm going to tell this story really quick, but years ago, I got to do a presentation at a women's prison where there was a family child care provider, and it was generally on this topic of self-care. There was a family child care provider in the audience who had killed a child in her care, a little girl, best friend of her, a daughter of her best friend. The child had been screaming in the car seat, and she swung back, and a little rib snapped and punctured a little liver, and the child died. And I talked to this woman, and her whole thing was, Jeff, I was burnt out. I had 6 kids of my own. I'm doing family childcare. I had a husband who loved making new babies, but wasn't much of support beyond that. And I wasn't doing anything to care for myself. And then the tone this child hit when she cried pushed me over my edge. And I reacted a way I thought I could never react. And so just being aware of those things that maybe push you a little bit closer to your edge gives you a little bit more power over them. And that's a valuable thing when it comes to self-care, right? And I'm not suggesting that any of that is something like that's going to happen to any of you. And on the other hand, this woman never thought it was going to happen to her either. So it's really important that we be aware of those things. Something else I'd like you to make a list of and pay a little bit more attention to is your own needs. Put this heading on a piece of paper tomorrow. I need, and then fill in the list. I need a good night's sleep. I need to know my schedule a few more days in advance so I can plan my life. I need somebody to listen to me, like really listen. I need time away from children, around adults. Whatever it is, make that list for yourself. Because the only way your needs are going to get met is if you start paying attention to them and working to meet them. If you're waiting for somebody else to come along and meet your needs, you're going to wait a long, long time. You have to be responsible for your needs. And the first step towards meeting them is identifying them. And that can be hard. You got to be really brutally honest with yourself. and the payoffs are great. And maybe you can take those needs and start working them into that little bit of time you take for yourself in the morning. So I needed to stop snowing. Somebody put in the chat. Yes, that would be delightful. Stop snowing and warm up about 50 degrees. So the other thing about that self-care is if you really start making that a habit, you're going to become more effective at being yourself. And that 5 or 10 minutes is going to turn into 15 or 20 or 20 or 30 minutes over time, because you're going to be more efficient at your own life. And that time that you didn't think you had for self-care is going to start showing up in your days, maybe in little tiny ways, but you're going to have more of it when you start this process. We're running this should I do 6-hour versions of this back in times where we got together in human time, so we're really squeezing a lot in. And while I'm mentioning that, if I go through anything too fast, and I'm sure I have, and you need any resources or support, all you got to do is reach out to me. I'll put a link to one of my websites in the chat when we're done. And I love talking about this and offering resources to support. So that I'm available for follow-up stuff too, because implementation is hard. Another thing I want you to think about when it comes to self-care is feeding your good dog. I'll tell you a story. There's a grandfather takes a grandchild out camping, and they spend a couple days out in the nature, hiking and kayaking and fishing and being in the nature, and it's great, and they have a lot of a good time together. And after a couple days, they're on the last night of their trip, and they're sitting around their little campfire, looking up at the stars and talking and poking at the fire embers and just chatting. And the grandfather says, "You know, I have a good dog and an evil dog inside me. And the evil dog is always fighting the good dog." And then he stops talking, pokes the fire a little bit more, looks up at the stars. Grandchild, 6, 7 years old, sits there patiently for about 15 seconds and impatiently for another 15 seconds, and then says, "Papa, Papa, which dog wins?" And the grandfather pokes the fire a couple more times and looks at the child and says, "The one that I feed the most." Now, we all have those same 2 dogs living inside of us. And if you are focusing on the negativity in life, the stress, the frustration, the anger, all of the negative stuff, you're feeding your evil dog, and your evil dog wins the fight, and you radiate evil dog out into the world. On the other hand, if you feed your good dog on the joy and hope and humor and positivity in the world, your good dog wins the fight, and you radiate good dog out into the world. Now, you all know people in your lives who are good dog feeders and evil dog feeders. There are people in your life. If you're in the grocery store and you see somebody who is just full of the evil dog at the other end of the aisle, you will turn your cart around and go the other direction so you don't have to have an interaction with them. Some of you probably done it within the last month. And the thing is, our human brains are wired with a slight bias towards the evil dog. And that's an evolutionary thing. We're wired, our human brains are still wired like they were 10,000 years ago when we were living on the savannas, worried about thunderstorms and saber-toothed tigers trying to kill us. And so we're wired to pay attention and be a little bit twitchy about negative things. When you go into the grocery store, for example, and you get that cart with the wobbly wheel, you pay attention to that. The other 40 times that you've walked into the grocery store and grabbed a cart that didn't have any problems, you never focused on, hey, wow, look at this great cart I got today. No, we focus on that negative thing. And so just by thinking about this, you can change which dog you're feeding just by paying attention to it. You can change your reactions. We are wired in a way that we get to choose how we react to things. Sometimes we think our reactions are just emotional and happen to us, but you've got a choice. And as an example, have you ever been in a room with somebody who is upset with you and they're giving you a piece of their mind? If they were Mr. Potato Head, they would have their angry eyes in. And then in the middle of ripping you, their phone rings, and they answer that phone, and the angry eyes pop out and the happy eyes pop in, and they answer with, "Oh, hi. I was waiting for your call. It's so good to hear from you. Oh, it's been too long." And that conversation, that pleasant conversation goes on for 20 minutes. As soon as the phone is disconnected, the angry eyes get popped back in and they're back to growling at you again. Any of you ever experienced something like that? Any of you ever, anybody want to admit to being the person with the angry eyes? I have. We get to choose, and we can turn it on and off like that. And so you can, and it's hard to do. You can, when you feel when you feel the evil dog wanting to feed, you can take a breath and change the way you're reacting and turn that into a good dog experience. And think about this. Have there ever been days with the children you work with where you think, wow, these kids are really climbing the walls today? What's up with them? They're driving me crazy. And then you realize that they're responding to an emotion or mood that you're bringing into the room. Our mood matters, especially with young kids. Young children are wired to be tuned into the mindset of their adults because their whole survival depends on us, right? And so they are really, really good at reading our emotions. And so we really need to pay attention to what we bring into that classroom, and bringing in a cup that has something with it, a cup of emotional energy that has something in it, is much more effective than bringing in an empty one. I'm going to give you an example that I mentioned it a couple times. Here's a real world example. I got to get a drink of tea before I tell the story. Years ago in our family child care program, Hunter was sitting on the toilet. And my goal for the day was for Hunter to sit on that toilet until he took care of business. And we all know what I mean by took care of business. He was 3.5 years old. He was the youngest of four, and not housebroken yet. And my experience is a lot of times parents, that youngest child learn skills like how to use the toilet later than some of the older siblings, because the parents are like, oh, this is my last baby, and if they don't have the pacifier or they poop in the toilet or whatever, they won't be a baby anymore. And so there's some dynamic going on there with the family. But whatever, Hunter is sitting there. I want him to poop in the toilet, and we are talking about sticks and dirt and motorcycles, the only thing he cares about. And I like to converse about other things, but I'm going to talk about sticks and dirt and motorcycles all day long if it results in him pooping in the toilet and me not having to change a diaper that was 15 minutes later. I didn't want to deal with it. And so we're sitting there and we're talking. And then out of the blue, Hunter says, "Hey, Jeff, I can poop on my hand." And does. And he's proud. He's got this look of accomplishment on his face. And I was not, I wanted to run away. I was not as happy about this as young Hunter was. And he saw that I wasn't as impressed by his new skill as he thought I would be. And his face kind of melts, and he gets this really concerned and serious look on his face. He says, "You don't like it?" And I said, "Well, no, I mean, it's great, but most people don't poop on their hands." And he said, "Oh, what should I do with it?" And I said, "Why don't you drop that in the toilet and flush with your other hand, and then go wash your hands wash them 3 times." And he did that, and we went on with our day. Now, that was at a time when I was taking care of myself. I was dealing with my burnout, and I was making time every day for self-care. There are other times in my 26 years of direct caregiving that I would have scolded him. I would have done the fast walk. You know, the fast walk is where you get the kid by the shoulder and you walk a little bit faster than they can walk because you need them to know you're angry, and the kid's getting drug along, and then you put them in timeout. Now I know timeout doesn't work. Timeout is ineffective. There are a lot of better choices than timeout, but sometimes we want them to be away from us. And I would have growled under my breath as I cleaned everything up, and I would have growled for the rest of the day, because I didn't have the emotional resources left over to deal with it. So, but because I was taking care of myself, because my head was in the game, it ended up being just a nice, calm kind of, hey, this thing happened, and then we moved on from it. Because Hunter wasn't trying to be bad. Hunter was a 3-year-old doing a science experiment. And later that day, I called his mother. Now, I met his mother in 3rd grade, known her most of my life. And I get her on the phone and I said, Michelle, interesting thing happened today. And she's like, do tell. This was not the first afternoon call she'd got from me about something her son had done. And I start telling her this story, and she starts laughing hysterically. And the more I tell the story, the more she laughs. And she's like doing that thing where she can't catch her breath. And the more she laughs, the more annoyed with her I'm getting, because I'm getting the feeling there's something going on here I didn't know about. And this goes on for a couple of minutes. And she says, Jeff, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I paused and I said, told me what? And she said, well, last weekend we went down to Omaha and we went to the zoo. And he was watching monkeys for a long time. He must have spent 90 minutes watching the monkeys and the apes. And I just got to tell you, you're lucky he didn't throw it at you. And I did feel lucky in that moment. We never know what the children are going to bring into our programs. And it might be what years later. Hunter is about to graduate high school now, if he didn't graduate last year. Years later, this funny thing that happened, but it can be worse stuff. A lot of you are working with kids that are dealing with really serious stuff in their lives. And then we've got this whole, I don't know if you've noticed, there's been a pandemic going on for the last year, which makes the work a little bit more stressful. So there's so much going on that when we can bring a slightly better version of ourselves, a slightly more effective version of ourselves into the job, it gets just a tiny bit easier. Another one I want to throw at you is the idea that you are all going to die. I mean, not today, probably. That's not a threat. But I mean, it's just kind of what happens at the end of life. And at some point, there's going to be a hunk of granite or a brass plate or a Facebook post that's going to have your name and then the year you were born and the year you died, separated by this tiny little dash. And that dash is the sum total of your life. Every action, interaction, reaction, every hug, every kiss, every tear, everything that made up you is summarized in that tiny little dash. And when you go to sleep tonight, I want you to think, am I making the most of my dash? And if you realize that maybe you could make a little bit more of your dash, when you wake up tomorrow morning, I want you to do one thing that makes you a little bit happier with your life and your existence. One tiny, tiny little thing. Because what happens to us a lot, and this last year has kind of has amplified that. A lot of times we get stuck in the roteness, the monotony of our own lives. Yesterday is like the day before, and that's kind of like what tomorrow is going to be. And so we just kind of get stuck going through these motions in our own lives. I've met people who decided they were going to work in early learning for a couple of years while their kids were young, and then when their kids started school, they were going to get a quote unquote real job, and they're still doing this work 30 years later. And they'd had other dreams and goals, but they stuck here. And the thing is, if your professional goals really lay someplace else, Life is too short not to work towards that. I'm not saying quit your job tomorrow and go do something else, but I'm saying if you really want to be doing something else in your life, you need to make time for that and work towards that. But even non-professionally, the little things that you could be doing to make life a little bit more enjoyable and fulfilling for yourself. And one of the ways we do that is we build a life where we do the scary thing. Saying no to people, like we talked about a little bit ago, is a hard and scary thing for some people. But look for opportunities to get out of your rut and make the most of your dash by doing a scary thing now and then. I'll give you a couple examples. I've been lucky enough to go to Australia 4 times to do presentations, and it's been delightful. On our first trip, lucky enough, my wife got to come, Tasha got to come with me on all those trips as well. And on the first trip, we're in Adelaide, South Australia, and it's after the conference, and we're out of this pier, this long wooden pier that goes out into the water, and you look down, and the water's just perfectly clear, 20 feet down, and out at the end of the pier, there's this big rusty old a sign that says some version of, "Hey, don't jump off of this pier." And you can tell it's been there for like generations. And on the other side of the sign, there are a bunch of teenagers jumping off the pier. Mostly teenage boys showing off for teenage girls, but the few girls that were out there were really bringing some wild dives. I mean, they're awesome. And so all this diving is going on, and we're watching this for 15-20 minutes, and it's just great. And then Tasha says to me, "I'm going to do that." And I looked at her and I said, "I'll hold your purse." Because look, we've been together, I don't know how long forever is, but we've been together forever. She picked me up when she was just turning 16 and I was 17. And that's not who she is. She's not a pier jumper. But then she handed me her purse, and she walked over to where those kids were, and she crawled over the wooden railing. And the kids looked at her like, "What's grandma doing out here?" But then she walked up to the edge and she jumped, splash, swam over to this rusty barnacle covered ladder, climbed up with this huge grin on her face. And I said, "You got to do it again. I didn't get a picture. We don't have a picture. It doesn't count. You got to do it again. I didn't think you were going to do it." And so she does it a second time. And we got pictures, and I don't know, maybe still for a long time, those were her social media profile pictures. And again, she comes up the ladder, and those kids are like, "Hey, grandma here is pretty awesome." And she does it a third time, but this time, instead of coming up that metal ladder, she swims to shore like a boss. This is an idea of doing a scary thing. Another one, maybe not quite that grand. Years ago, I was in New Jersey doing a presentation, and a woman came up to me after the session. I was talking about this topic, and she said, "Jeff, I'm going to do the scary thing. I'm going to learn to ride a bike." And she explained that she'd never learned to ride a bike because she lived in Newark, New Jersey when she was growing up, and everybody was poor and nobody had bikes, and there wasn't any place safe to ride a bike. And if you got your hands on a bike, somebody stole it. So she never learned to ride a bike. And now she lived on the end of a cul-de-sac next to a trail, and her daughter had learned to ride a bike. And when they used to go out on the trail and be together, but now her daughter was way down the trail. And she thought, "Jeff, if I can learn to ride a bike, then we can be together on the trail for a couple more years before she grows up." And so I said, "Let me know how this goes." And the next morning, as I'm getting ready to go to the airport, I have an email from her, pictures of her with her new helmet and pointing to her bike in the back of the minivan on her way home. She'd stopped right after the conference and bought a bike and a helmet. She did family childcare. She would get up half an hour earlier and practice under the streetlights in her cul-de-sac. And she got weird looks from the garbage men and raccoons in her neighborhood while she was doing this, trying to keep this secret from her daughter. And then one weekend, she says to her daughter, "You got to go put your laundry away, and I'll meet you in the garage in 20 minutes and we'll go down to the trail." And when the daughter showed up, mom was there straddling her bike, rocking back and forth with her helmet on and a big grin. And the daughter says, "Mom, what did you do?" And she said, I learned to ride so we can be on the trail together. And they pedaled off. Do your scary thing. Your scary thing might be telling somebody no, and do that. Your scary thing doesn't have to be a big grand thing, but doing your scary thing can move you in a direction that makes that dash just a little bit more fulfilling. And it gives you a little bit more self-confidence. For me, this right here, this is my scary thing. It's even scarier when the other people are in the room talking to people. I was the kid in high school that when you get your index cards and you got to get up and do a 30-second presentation in front of the class, couldn't do it. Then sometime I started volunteering for, well, it was the Iowa AYC conference, October of 2000, I think it was, did my first presentation. Terrified, but I lived through it. And did good enough that other people asked me to do other stuff. And I've been lucky enough that it's become a job, and I get to go used to go amazing places. Now even better, I stay at home and do it, and get to sleep in my own pillow at night. And it made life better doing the thing that terrified me the most. And so look for that thing in your life, and maybe take the opportunity to put yourself out there a little bit more. It's hard, it's scary, and the payoffs are great. Another one I want to throw out at you as an idea for self-care is always keeping in your mind, and this is kind of related to doing the scary thing, is the idea of following the law of 2 feet. The law of 2 feet says that if you find yourself in a situation or location where you don't feel valued or appreciated or like you're contributing or learning, you should use your 2 feet and go someplace else. A lot of times we lock ourselves into things in our lives in that short little dash, and we don't make changes because we think changes are going to be too disruptive. And we humans are we're creatures of comfort. And so the whole idea of change is kind of scary and uncomfortable for us. But if you're unhappy in your life, you need to make a change, because nobody's going to come along and change those things for you. And if you're just going to wait for things to get better, you're going to, again, wait a long, long, long time. So you need to be proactive about making things better in your life. Now, it's about time for me to stop. I want to recap. 5 or 10 minutes every day for yourself, doing something that puts a little bit back in your cup so that you have a little bit of emotional energy where that reserve that you can give to the people you interact with. That little bit of time for yourself is valuable, but do a scary thing now and then. Say no to the things in your life you don't have time for or interest in, so that you can make time for the things that really feed your soul. Be a little bit selfish with your time. Pay attention to the things that aren't working in your life, but more so pay attention to the things that are going right and try to give them a little bit more attention and energy, because it's easier to do more of those things. Make a list for yourself of everything that gets under your skin so that you're aware of it, so it doesn't sneak up on you. Make a list of the things that you need so that you can proactively start meeting those needs. Just tiny little steps every day lead to positive changes. And if you can do a couple of those things, knowing that you're going to have setbacks and that's okay and part of the process, where you forgive yourself and you start over the next day, you can create this cycle of positivity and positive change in your life that moves you in a better direction. It's about time for me to shut up. I know there's some door prizes. I'm here for questions if anybody has them for as long as you want. There have been some names in the chat coming up that I recognize, and some people have seen this session way more than once. And so I appreciate you showing up for this. So where do we go now? I'm gonna have a drink of tea.
Yeah, Jeff, I just want to thank you so much. I mean, there's been lots of love for you in the chat box, which is really great, but you just have such a way of sharing such a motivational message and really giving childcare providers concrete ways. I know there's so many of your tips really resonated with me tonight, but really just, tacking on at the beginning, the beginning of the day to your morning habits. You know, I just think that you shared so many wonderful things with the providers tonight. So really, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you
and if
much.
if anyone does have any specific questions for Jeff, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat box at any time. And we know that self-care is really important, and you know, we know that we're all busy. So really just finding time to do some of these things is really the key.
I just pasted a link into the chat to my I've got a website, playvolutionhq.com, and there's a whole section there of self-care articles that I've been collecting over the years. So I think there's 140, 150 articles there if anybody's looking for more reading to do on the topic.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, you're welcome to hang on while we do the door prizes. It'll probably only be another 5 minutes, or you're welcome to hop off whenever you want. But we will post the recording to this session. And then when we post the recording, we are going to include a link to Jeff's website where you will find all of the other things he has to offer, as well as his contact information. I know you said you'd be available for any questions, or if anyone follows through with anything, to share that with you. So thank you for making yourself available for that. All right, now we'll get to tonight's door prizes. So there are 10 door prize packages again this evening. There were 10 this morning and there are 10 this evening. So the first 2 packages tonight will include free admission to Jeff Johson's upcoming self-care seminar. Jeff, is there anything you want to share just quickly about that? I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, so I mentioned that, you know, implementation is hard, and so we've got this thing going on. I'm going to do a 8-month-long, 1 hour a month session on self-care, and it's going to be, I'm going to do 5 or 10 minutes at the top of the session. You know, just little stuff like we talked about tonight, little things. But then the rest of it's going to be that group that's going through this, sharing their stories and kind of being a support group for everybody else involved, and working through that process so that we can help people implement that self-care. Because it's what people do. They go to a session and then tomorrow morning they wake up and they fall back into their old routines. And so the whole idea is to help people build some new routines.
Awesome. And so if you so generously donated one of those, and then we bought one as well, but if providers don't win, is there a way that they can sign up for that?
Yeah, if you go to the explorationsearlylearning.com website, it's $45 for the whole 8 sessions. And if you get a hold of me, I can probably find you a coupon code.
All right, thank you so much. So the first 2 names that I draw will have those 2 tickets for those complimentary admissions. And then everyone will also get a self-care package. So all 10 will get the package, and then the 2 will get the free admission. So I'll show you what's in the self-care package. Everyone that wins tonight will receive a copy of Jeff Johson's book, Finding Your Smile Again. The package also includes some self-care and stress less cards, give you some practical things to do every day to practice your self-care. And then just a fun back scratcher and some fuzzy spa socks, just something to help you relax. So I will read the names of those winners. They were drawn randomly during Jeff's presentation. So I apologize if I don't pronounce anyone's name right or someone's name. I'm going to do my best here. Okay, so the first 2 that win are going to also get that free admission. So I will share your email and your names with Jeff after this. So the first 2 winners are Regina Meyer and Sherry Clark. So you'll be getting the 2 tickets to the seminar, and then also the package. And then the rest of the 8 winners are Michelle Heinz, Lisa Dozer, Tara Wilson, Kimberly Smith, Karen Ellsburn, Hannah Lynch, Courtney Hesse, and Brenda Dopler. So we will get together. I will contact all of you, and we'll make a plan for getting the door prize to you. Congratulations on winning, and thank you for attending. If you have any other questions for Jeff and I, feel free to pop them in the chat box. I always ask for questions and then I don't pause long enough, so I'll give everyone a chance to pop anything in the chat box.
I want to mention fuzzy socks. I didn't have that in the presentation, but I'm currently wearing some fuzzy socks, and they're delightful for self-care. So good on you for having those in those door prizes.
Yeah, for sure. If you do have any other questions, or you want to follow up with me about anything that you learned tonight, or if you need Jeff's contact information or anything else, again, you can find us on Facebook, on YouTube, or you could just email me directly at jdavis@orchardplace.com. and we want to thank you all for joining us tonight. The celebration continues tomorrow, so join us again with Child Care Resource and Referral in Region 5 for an uplifting session that's dedicated to the benefits of music. That will be tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. The name of the book is Finding Your Smile Again, and you have a lot of other books, don't you, Jeff? Or at least
Yeah,
you
there's
have
another
more than
Burnout one that's called Keeping Your Smile, and then there's, I don't know, 6 or 8 others.
Awesome. So look into those if you're interested in any of the other ones he has. Okay, join us tomorrow at 2:30 for the benefits of music. We'll see you then.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
night.